Hello and welcome to the Athletic Soccer Show, the World Cup post-game show after we've just seen Morocco knock Portugal out of this World Cup and become, in the process, the first ever African side to reach the semi-finals of the World Cup. We've just seen history in the making. My name is Jack Collins and I'll be your host, and I'm joined once again by the brilliant Mr. Rich Amofa. How you doing, Rich?
Hey, man. Yeah, all good, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. Obviously, we had some tragic news this morning with the news breaking of the death of Grant Wall, a giant in this world. Never knew him personally, but you've seen the stories and the tributes coming out of, well, pretty much everyone in the industry this morning. And it's just clear what a giant he was, what a wonderful man he was, and some of the most incredible journalism that I think has come out in the football sphere in the last 10, 15 years, a true inspiration. So I'm sure I speak for both of us in sending, our condolences and love to his friends and family. A really tough time for the football community here. And I think that we're seeing in those tributes, Rich, what an incredible human being, as well as an incredible journalist that Grant was.
Yeah, 100%. If you look at, as you say, all the tributes which have come in, it's a common theme. First of all, as a man, as a human being, really lovely guy. Same as you, I didn't know him personally, but you can only go by what everyone's saying. Really sheds light on his character and who he was. Always ready to help, always ready to provide support, and he stood for what he believed in, and he spoke truth to power. And that really came out in his journalism. And as you say, he was a real trailblazer for football, not just in the United States, but you say around the world in terms of how football was perceived in the US and just journalism in general. When you're coming up in the industry, he's one of the first names that you hear about. You want to learn from, and you want to be like, really. So it was really, really sad news when you say we found out this morning. And may he rest in peace, and condolences to his friends and family.
Absolutely, an inspiration to so many of us in this football world. The football world has been paying tribute, but we've seen a history-making day in the fact, and that feels so right in so many ways. And so we'll come on to the football and to Morocco and Portugal, because this is a stunning result for pretty much everyone associated with the sport. There's been so much of a Eurocentric, I think, feel about so much of the journalism that's come around it, sure, but also you look at these different elements of this game, and Morocco were a team that we came out, and you and I spoke about this in the pre-game show. Someone we thought could ruffle feathers, someone that we thought would be a really difficult side to deal with, but I don't think anybody had them in the semi-finals. And it's an incredible day for not just Moroccan football, but for African football as well, Rich.
Yeah, again, full value for their result as well, by the way. I mean, on paper, you'd say it's a shock, but looking at how the game panned out, they were the better side. They created the better chances, and they were just phenomenal. Every single player, from 1 to 11, and the subs that came on, the management, the coaches, they're absolutely fantastic and full value for their victory today. And you say the scenes at the end were just amazing to see again. And they march on, and as you say, whoever wins out of the game tonight, England, France, will have a very, very, very difficult semi-final, because Morocco will go and go and go all the way to the end, and they got that sprinkling of quality as well, which has proven decisive.
Yeah, and this is it, right? This game played out pretty much as we would have expected. Portugal had a lot of the ball, a lot of possession. Morocco happy to sit in, to funnel them wide in the same way that they did against Spain. And Portugal struggled to break them down for pretty much the entire game. There are 2-3 major chances for Portugal, one right in the first minute from João Felix, one in the dying seconds with Pepper. And you get to these kind of moments, you're like, in between them, Portugal didn't open up Morocco in any sort of way or form. And look, there are question marks over the goalkeeping for the goal, but just generally in terms of the game that played out in front of us, it was almost the exact game that you'd imagine Morocco wanted it to be. That it was played in front of them in the same way that the Spain game was. And every time that Portugal tried to play those diagonals out to the wings to try and open things out, Morocco were there to thwart them. All those diagonals weren't quite on the money, and ultimately, it was a game of very few clear-cut chances for Portugal.
Yeah, I think Portugal played exactly into Morocco's hands, and that is credit to their manager, Regragui, in terms of they set the traps. As you say, they forced them out wide, and every cross that came in, they were saying, "Thank you very much. We'll head that away. We'll kick that away. And they look pretty comfortable, I would say, and they provided a threat down the other end, and it wasn't really until Rafael Leao came on that we saw a different dynamic from Portugal. As you rightly say, Portugal had played a lot of possession football in front of Morocco, and Morocco were adept in dealing with that. It wasn't until Leao came on and started taking players on, or trying to anyway, and committing men and driving the ball forward, that you're probably looking at Portugal thinking, okay, they are looking slightly more threatening. But I think, as I said earlier, Morocco were full value for that victory. They were okay. They defended resolutely, but I didn't look at any part of that game and think, oh, they're in trouble here. I thought they were very comfortable dealing with Portugal. And as I say, down the other end, they created a much better chances throughout the game. As I say, the Pepe chance at the end was crucial, of course, but throughout the 90 minutes, Morocco were by far the better side.
Yeah, and this is it. I think sometimes we look at games and you go, right, well, Portugal had all the ball, and they had the lion's share of territory as well. They were mostly played in Morocco's half, although not, interestingly, in that final third, which I think is part of this. But equally, you look at these kind of games and you kind of trying to work out exactly how and where they're in shape, and how the game is kind of nullified. And one of the things I thought was interesting was that we saw this from Morocco and Spain game. They block out the middle really, really well. The two centre-backs, Elliot Meek, by the way, coming in for his first start of the World Cup after Naif Akeb was injured in the Spain game, and dropping a masterclass a centre-back. Saiss goes off, the captain and his partner, and Morocco bring in two different centre-backs, obviously Dari and Benoun come on. And you're looking at it going, okay, this is now a relatively untested, untried. It's the third, fourth, and fifth choice centre-backs who are now playing in there for Morocco. And they just looked completely unruffled by everything that was going on. And it's really interesting to think about, because Portugal don't really play with wingers, or haven't done so at this World Cup. Now, we saw Fernando Santos change his strategy a little bit from kind of a 4-2-3-1, which we'd seen a lot from Portugal, into a sort of 4-4-2 diamond-ish, with João Felix sort of buzzing around off Gonzalo Ramos or Cristiano Ronaldo earlier in the World Cup. And it meant that when they were trying to get into these wide positions, which is where Morocco were inviting them to go, they were opening those channels and going, here you go. If you want to get us, you're going to have to go down the wings. And it was pulling Portugal out of the shape that I think that they were trying to play in, where they've been really effective is in those kind of narrow channels. There was just no way of doing that. And it took Santos quite a long time to actually try and get into those channels, by which time Morocco had gone to that five at the back, and there was far less space in there than there had been at the end of the first half, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And that shape actually proved to be decisive. You look at the goal, Dalot out wide as the right back. Of course, with the diamond, there's no other winger to support him, and he's caught in the overload there. And when I first looked at it, I thought, Dalot's got to stop the cross. He's got to stop the cross coming in. But if you look at it again, he's outnumbered there. And if he goes to press the man in the ball, the fullback had overlapped him, and as you say, he was outnumbered there. They did well to create the overload, and they're able to whip the ball into the box. And as you say, that's where the goal came from. So if anything, that diamond proved to be decisive against Portugal today in both ways. Going forward, it hampered them, as you say, to try to get the ball out wide, but it lacked quality. And then defensively, it proved to be decisive for the goal as well. So something that, well, it'll be interesting if Santos stays on after this, or it'll be unlikely. But moving forward, it's not something that you'd expect to see from Portugal, especially with their attacking talent and the young players coming through, which you spoke about just before we came on air. You want to see them playing with the traditional 4-3-3 and really showing that flair in the final third, which we didn't see today. And we didn't really see much in the tournament, apart from the Switzerland game, where I guess Switzerland had mitigating factors. A lot of their players were ill. It transpired, but apart from that game, we didn't really see the Portugal which we were looking forward to, that we were expecting. So moving forward, we have to see those young players coming in and showcasing that flair, which we know they can do.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to Portugal and kind of what the future holds for the national team and for the Seleção. But we have to talk about this goal because there's so much of it that was kind of questioned, and people calling that it's a mistake from Diogo Costa. I do think there is an element of that. I do think he's probably not quite in the position he should be in for the goal. But generally, I think the leap from En-Nesyri is absolutely sublime. The amount of height he gets to get up for this ball, the kind of single-mindedness to demand that he is going to be the one that wins it. And I do think there's kind of a little bit of a mitigating circumstance, if you will, for Diogo Costa, in that Ruben Dias is kind of in the wrong place, and he'd have had to come straight through his centre-back and through the opposition player in order to try and get this. Now, he should have done that, but it would have put Dias at real risk. And I think that there's an element of mix-up between the two of them for the goal that En-Nesyri takes full advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, that leap is just incredible, and I think it really personifies Morocco as a whole in terms of just wanting it more. And I know that's quite simplistic, but when you see the cross coming in, you're thinking, okay, your goalkeepers, because it was quite high, right?
Keeper's
It's quite
ball, yeah.
a bit of a looping cross. So you're thinking, the keeper, just come and claim, take the ball, take both men. That's what you want from your goalkeeper. Dominate your area. He got it wrong. Diaz got it wrong. And as I say, Dallo got it wrong. Well, I'd say the shape was wrong because he got caught 2v1. Ball comes in, and En-Nesyri said, this is my ball. I'm going to win this. And he completely cleared Diaz out of the way, which you wouldn't expect from someone of Diaz's quality. And yes, okay, you can look at the goalkeeper. Yeah, you want him to command your box, but, you want to give Morocco and En-Nesyri the full credit there. He wanted it more. He made sure that he was going to be the one who was going to decide today's game, and he ultimately did that.
Yeah, I mean, look, Morocco played this out so incredibly smartly. And this is the first thing we talk about. And look, when teams play on the counter, sometimes you think of it and you go, how's this going to play out? How are they going to create? But as you said right at the start, they created the better opportunities here. Abu Klal really should have made it too right at the end, but there were a couple of moments. Chidiri, before he decided to get sent off, Kate got through, and there looked like there was a really easy pass into the channel, actually, for Renahi to slot home and really put the game to bed around the 70th minute mark. And these were the opportunities that opened up. A couple of 3-on-3s. Ati Alar in the first half firing wide, where he probably should have done a little bit better. But generally, I think that these are the opportunities that you look at and go, they're the big ones. And when you look at the way that Morocco played and the way they were able to play out of the Portuguese press, switch sides, make the ball work, make the ball do the hard work. And Amrabat, again, dropping another masterclass. This is what, 3-4 in a row from him now that he's just been absolutely unassailable in front of the back four. But this is it. The intelligence that Morocco played this game out with was the thing that's won this game. And the strategic nous of Walid Regragui, who, bear in mind, still has only conceded one goal as when he's been in charge of this Morocco team. This is not just in the World Cup, but generally just since he came in, I think it was in August. And the one goal is an own goal. Nobody has scored a goal against this Morocco team. That's pretty stunning.
It is absolutely incredible. And as you mentioned, Emmanuel said there, it's not a fluke. He's won the African Champions League with Casablanca. This is a coach with pedigree. It's a coach which is going places. As you say, he's coming in August. He's galvanized the side. And you talk about the chances there. And I was a bit worried in the first half because you say En-Nesyri had a couple of headers from set pieces, which he probably should have scored from before his goal. And in addition to the other ones that you mentioned, and you're thinking, when they do get in those positions on the break, was the end product good enough? And probably not in the first half, and you're worried that Portugal might come and make them pay, and the so-called luck would run out. But no, this wasn't luck at all. This was a fantastic game plan. They caught Portugal on the break multiple times. They opened them up a number of times, and as I say, they could have easily won that game 2, maybe 3-0 if they'd been more decisive in front of goals. So yeah, it was just a fantastic all-round performance. You mentioned Amrabat. Unahi today was just incredible. He was absolutely everywhere. Interception on his own box, breaking forward to make the final pass in the final third. He was everywhere today, and he was absolutely fantastic. And as I say, it was just an amazing all-round performance, and nobody is going to want to face them moving forward. As you say, England, France tonight, the winners will face Morocco, and they will have their work cut out to try and penetrate them and score against them, because they're so resolute at the back. It's everywhere to a man. It's 10 out of 10, and they've all had a fantastic tournament, and it's great to see them continue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to see two Group F teams in the semi-finals, right? Maybe Belgium weren't quite as bad as we thought they were earlier on in the tournament. But no, it's really interesting. And look, there's going to be 2 UEFA teams, 2 European teams, a South American team of CONMEBOL, and an African team of CAF in the semi-finals. That's great for the world game. You know, it shows that kind of leveling of the playing field a little bit, I think. And I think generally that's something that we can all look forward to and make sure that, you know, it's given the credit it deserves. And also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this win and the semi-final berth for an African nation means it's going to be 10 guaranteed spots rather than 9 at the next World Cup for CAF, which is another massive bonus for the federation and for African football. So I'm sure there'll be plenty celebrating, you know, around the continent today. So, you know, just before we move on, we'll talk quickly about Portugal, because this will probably be the end for Pepe, who's had a wonderful, wonderful career at international level, and Cristiano Ronaldo, who's the same, right? And, you know, there's some sadness, I think, amongst the Portuguese contingent that this is the end of an era from those 2 players. And there's a couple more as well. I don't think William Carvalho will get to another World Cup. Danilo Pereira, probably the same. But, you know, this is a generation of Portugal players who have won the country's first ever silverware at the Euros and then the Nations League. And there is an incredibly talented generation who will be ready in 2 years' time. You know, we're looking at much of this team. Diogo Costa, yes, made a mistake today, but very, very young goalkeeper and on his way to becoming one of the best in the world. Ruben Dias will still be around. You look at Cancelo, at Diogo Dalot. You look at Antonio Silva coming through at Benfica. You look at Vitinha, who I think is going to be one of the best centre midfielders in the world. Pellegrini, who's having a cracking year at Fulham. You know, Bernardo will still be there. Felix, Fernandes, Ramos, Leao. It's an incredibly exciting time to be a Portugal fan as well. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see this new generation kick on, you know, maybe without that shadow of history from the last generation hanging over them a little bit.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think, like all things, all good things have to come to an end. And as you say, they you know, the previous generation won Euros, won the Nations League, and you know they can go out and say we've done this for our country. But now it's about looking forward and really planning ahead for the next Euros and the next World Cup. You know, the list you've ruled out there of talent is incredible, and if they are able to be guided by the right management, and as I say, allowed to showcase their flair and their talents, and they're able to get that cohesive unit, then you know they have the potential to be unstoppable. Well, of course, it's sad. It's always an end of an era, of course, when you see players and managers bow out, as we've seen a few times at this tournament, of course. But you say the next generation is really exciting for them. And if you're a Portugal fan, okay, this is tinged with sadness, but you want to be looking forward now and thinking, okay, we've got a lot to build on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Let's throw forward, shall we, to the other quarterfinal taking place today. England play France in the late game. There's been a lot of talk, Rich, about Mbappe versus Walker. There's been a lot of talk about how this one is going to play out. France feel like favourites, but I would suggest only just. This is a team that are defending world champions, of course, but we've seen, as of the last Euros, that there are flaws in this side, that they are not unbeatable. And yet, there does feel like a cohesiveness around them this time out, which we maybe didn't see quite as much last time.
Yeah, I think we spoke about it on the last pod, didn't we? Especially that balance of their front four, is an enticing prospect from a French perspective. The talent and the all-round game, which all possess, all of them possess threats and danger to England's back line. But as you say, it's not as cut and dry as what people think. England have a lot going forward as well, and we saw in the last game against Poland that if you're able to get at the fullbacks, you can have joy. And maybe with better quality, Poland would have had that. And with England's quality, you expected England to capitalise on similar chances. So I think it'd be it's not as cut and dry as what people may be predicting. It'll be a really, really interesting tactical battle, and really intrigued to see how England set up as well, because a lot of talk about whether it will revert to a back five, which I hope they don't, and whether they'll sit deep and try and hit on a counter. Now, I'd like to see the opposite. I'd like to see England try and take the game to France and play in the front foot if possible, because that's the only way that I think we'll get joy. I think if England sit back and invite pressure, then it'll only be a matter of time before France break the deadlock. So play in the front foot, take the game to France, and see how they go, because they've got enough attacking talent to cause France problems as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and Southgate's basically hinted at the fact that he thinks he's going to play in the same style that he's played the rest of this tournament with. You know, he said he's probably going to stick to his guns, and I think in so many ways there are elements of this that people he's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because if England don't win this game, no matter how he sets up, there is going to be question marks over why they didn't use the other option available at the time. It's also interesting to see, you know, Bukayo Saka might just play in a slight hybrid role and kind of work back from that right wing position, which would basically give England the scope to move between formations at will. And look, he's going to be asked to do a lot of defending today, Bukayo Saka, no matter where he's playing, because ultimately you're looking at a team that have Theo Hernandez as the left back. So your right wing back's going to have, you saw your right wing back, your right winger, wherever he's, you know, set up as playing, is going to have to do a lot of tracking, no matter, you know, if his main goal is to attack or defend. You know, these things are going to happen because of the way that Theo is as a player. But you're right in that, you know, I think England have the tools to hurt France as well. And this is not a cut and dry, as you say. This is not one of those foregone conclusions. And we've seen, you know, upsets happen twice now of the 3 semi-finals we've watched. We've seen Croatia beat Brazil. We've seen Morocco beat Portugal. 2 of the sides that were billed as underdogs going through into the semi-finals. England will like that underdog billing, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And it's something that we've seen kind of throughout Southgate's tenure, almost not, you know, enjoying not having the full weight of pressure on them and really thriving. I guess we're in a situation now where, you know, questions are always asked of England about can they do it against the top sides. You know, we've seen they've done it against, you know, the lesser sides and sides that are potentially equal to them. But every time in tournaments, I guess under Southgate, you look at Belgium, you look at Italy, when you face that top tier nation, England have kind of been found wanting. But that kind of goes into my earlier point, because in those games, England tended to sit back and soak up pressure. So it'll be really interesting to see if they'll go the other way and, as I say, take the game to France. And I think, as you say, you know, if England do lose, and I think if England lose but go out fighting, and you hold your hand up and say, fair enough, we're beaten by the better side. But if it's a case of England sitting back and inviting pressure and losing again, then you're looking at a case of, okay, you've not learned from your mistakes. You've not learned from what's happened in the past. And we know that's something Southgate has done. You know, he's done a lot of research into previous tournament winning sides, you know, a lot of research into France and how they've done, Spain, Germany as well. And a lot of, okay, it's built on defensive stability, of course, but having that attacking verve in the final third, which is really important as well. So, yeah, it's really important that England do try and play in the front foot as much as possible today.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question before we wrap this up, Rich. You feeling confident?
You know, I am. I'm not nervous yet, because I think we have enough attacking talent to cause France problems. And this is the thing. Okay, France, of course, have Mbappe and Giroud's on fire, and Dembele and Griezmann, and obviously the work's going to be cut out to stop them. But we've also got Harry Kane, one of the best strikers in the world. You know, we've got Bukayo Saka, who's on fire. We've got Jude Bellingham, who everyone's talking about, and rightly so. You know, Phil Foden, and you know, probably, you know, one of England's generational talents. You know, these are players who can decide games, who can hurt teams, who can hurt France. And as you say, if we can play to their strengths and capabilities, then there's no reason why England can't score. I'm expecting England to score today. And as you say, whether they win the game remains to be seen. But in terms of nerves, I'm not really nervous. I just want to see a really good game. I want to see both sides going at it, and may the best team win, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. With that, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day here on the Athletic Soccer Show's World Cup post-game. We've talked about Morocco stunning Portugal and taking them out of the World Cup, and of course the upcoming fixture between France and England. Thank you so much for tuning in as ever, and thank you so much to Mr. Rich Amofa for joining me.
No, thanks for having me, Jack. Good to speak to you, and yeah, we will see what happens later. Looking forward to it.
We will indeed. We will indeed. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Athletic Soccer Show. I've been Jack Collins, and we will see you very shortly.